Hey friends, it's Jess with Virtually Visual, and today we're going to be diving into this really fun cloth cube tutorial, and this is going to be featuring design we're going to make in Figma, and then we are going to be using that as both the material and then also the vertex map for driving the cloth simulation. This is something that I think sometimes can be a little bit trickier than you might expect, so I thought it would be a great one for a tutorial today. It's also just visually really appealing and gives us a way to kind of dive into Figma as well. So if you're in the design space, you've probably seen Figma before. Typically it's used for UI design, and I actually was a UI designer before I was a creative director, so I'm very familiar with Figma and just the different purposes for like UI specific work. But the other thing is that you can just create shapes and more geometric things easily right from Figma. You don't have to be designing UI specifically. So this is kind of a perfect tool for us in this scenario where we just want to create a simple graphic that we can use as our material. You can do a free plan that gives you 3 files that can be published and you can invite people to, but there are unlimited drafts and there are also options to have sub pages on each page. So you could have a ton of drafts if you're just working like personally on your own things, and you could have a ton of sub files in that. So I'm gonna close my browser and open up Figma. So this is where I actually designed the geometric pattern that I made for my last post, showing this kind of cloth balloon cube thing. And these are what I meant by sub pages. So I have a section called doodling where I'm just kind of drafting different ideas. I have other things in here, stuff for Wix, more doodling things, but these are all pages. So I could go in here at any time and find other stuff that I have designed. But doodling is kind of where I was working the other day. We can even just go in and I'll show you how to make a new file, so I can go home and see different things I've worked on or pulled in here. I'm going to, as you can see, I have a lot of virtually visual stuff in here, and this is actually where I create all of my thumbnails, so we could just show that quickly. So it's kind of like chaotic in the layout. You can put stuff everywhere, and I have a ton of other sub pages on the side. But yeah, that's just kind of the layout of Figma and how that works. But once you have an account and you're kind of set up, we can just create a new design file here. And this will just be a draft, so we don't have to worry about it being published or running out of our page limit. And you can see we have page 1 on the left. You can also change your page background color. I personally like working with dark mode, so I'm going to do that. Something like that. I'm going to close the other page. And then the way I want to get started is I'm going to go down here. There's this frame icon for F, which is like they have all these different layouts here. This is helpful again for UI design where like you want to design a desktop or a MacBook Pro screen specifically, but we could also just click in the board and it'll create a square frame for us, and we can see info here like the layout to the actual size of this board or this little frame. So it's only 100 by 100 right now, which I know I want to change. So I'm going to hit this little link icon so they both change at the same time. And I might change this to like 2160 or 3840. I'll just do 2160 because that'll be like 2K. And then I'm holding control to zoom out and using my middle mouse button to navigate. So this is where we're going to actually make our design. So I'm going to change this to design. And then at the bottom here, you see we have these other tools. We have text, we have other shapes in here. So you can go in here, you can choose images, all this kind of stuff. There's a section here for plugins, so you could search for more things there. But I'm just going to keep this really simple today. We're just going to design something really straightforward, and then we'll use that for Cinema 4D. So let's dive in first with just a classic rectangle. And I'm just going to have this fill the entire background. This will be our background, and I'm just going to work in black and white for right now because we'll change the colors later. So we're going to paste another copy of that rectangle, and I'm just going to drag this down so it's maybe like around 1/3 of the size of the main background. And I'm going to just change this to a different shade of gray. And honestly, I'm just going to make a bunch of random sections here in this main rectangle. So I might do only like 3 main ones. Okay, so say this is our starting point. I have 4 kind of main chunks that I'm going to be working in and creating some shapes. The first thing I might do is I might grab polygon shape, and I'm just going to drag, I think a triangle could go in here. So I'm going to drag to create one of those, and let's change the color. And I really want to try to keep just 4 colors, so I'm going to use the color picker tool to match that one of the shades we've used already. So I'm going to just drag this to fill the full shape here as best I can. Okay, and I'm going to zoom in as much as I can just to really try to have that hit the exact line there. I'm then going to create maybe a few more triangles. Let's maybe rotate this one, make some copies. But let's say that we like that shape. I'm going to highlight all of these because I know I want them to be kind of merged together. And if we go up here, there's these 3 dots up here underneath the share button. And we can merge these shapes as a union selection. So I'm going to do that, and now it's got one element here instead of multiple. And then I'm going to create some other shapes. So I'm going to grab a star maybe, and maybe we want to put this so it lines up with that mark. And the other nice thing is I can kind of zoom in here and you see we have these 3 like circles, and this controls the count of points on the star. This controls the curve of the points, or the branches of the star, and then this controls that angle in the on the edges of the star points. So you can get pretty creative there. So maybe I want something like that that's a little bit starfish looking, and you might need to tweak it as you adjust the shape. I'm gonna make a couple copies. Okay. And then I might make another copy of the star, but this one I'm going to scale down, and maybe I'll put one of these here, and maybe one there. And these I'm going to change their color. I think we could add maybe some circles. So let's try that. Maybe I'll create another circle, and this one I want to go behind the triangle. And then if I hold Control and press the left facing bracket, it's going to start moving my shape, as you can see on the left, underneath different layers. So I want this, and then I'm going to drag this up. So maybe something like that could be fun. Let's add a few more shapes. Let's just copy our existing triangle here, the big one, scale that down, and maybe we'll drag this to be kind of centered there. Let's make another copy of our background circle. Make sure it's behind the other one. Might also make it this color. Then we can also do, we haven't shown this yet, if you hit P on your keyboard, you get the pen tool. So if you've used Photoshop, this will be really familiar. You just click and drag to create curved shapes. I use this all the time when creating graphics for social media. And then you can just close the shape, and then you could add a fill color here. So this is just an easy way to create your own shapes. So I'm going to delete that because that doesn't look very nice, and I'm just going to go back to our pen tool, and I'm going to click over here, and I'm going to create kind of a wavy shape here as best I can, and we can tweak this in a moment, but I'm just going to go something like this, and then create this kind of shape, and we'll add a fill color, delete the stroke, and then if we hit V and click, we'll get this. Let me Control and copy that. I'm going to delete it for a second because I want to make sure when I paste it, it's actually in the design frame. And let's change that color to the kind of mid-tone gray we've got. And again, I'm going to hold Control and press the left bracket so it goes to the back. I'm going to keep doing that. I want this section to be over that actually. So I'm going to change this and highlight and select with Shift all of those items, and I'm going to hit the right bracket this time to make that go over top. You can see that we still need to tweak the shape, so let's double click, and you can see we see the points again, and we can easily just adjust this. So I'm going to try to keep these centered. Okay, so let's say that that's kind of the shape we're going for. One thing we need to do is, as you can see, it overlaps still with this rectangle shape. So one thing I can do is I can select my rectangle background, select the shape, and then I'm going to Alt drag a copy of this outside of our board. And with both selected, so we see their edges, I'm going to go back up to that little three dots menu, and I'm going to hit use as mask. And you need whatever shape you want to be the main mask shape to be on the very back layer. And what that's going to do is it's going to crop the front shape to that back shape outline, and it will create kind of this transparent new shape for us. So I can delete this old one now. We can copy and paste this one in here, and I'm going to just line this up, and then again use our control bracket keys to move the layer where we want, and then we can just delete this. So now we've got our own unique shape in here. I want to keep this fairly straightforward and simple, so the only other thing I might do now is add maybe some more stars. I think that could be cool. I think we need some more stuff in here and maybe one other thing in here. So I might actually just go in this time with some lines, increase the stroke here, and we can even change the end of this. So we could change this end to be a circle, diamond, triangles, arrow itself. Maybe we do a triangle arrow. Go back up to the little mini. Okay, so if you hit unions selection, it will turn it into a shape. So that's what we want. I'll create a few more circles and then we'll call it good. Let's say that I am happy now with the design. I think we've got something really fun and pretty straightforward here as far as our shapes. It's nothing crazy, but it still is interesting to look at. First thing I'm going to do is click on our design frame here, and we can see all of our selection colors. I actually only want 4 colors in my design, and I can see we have one thing that is just straight white, which is this arrow. So I'm going to copy our lightest shade. Actually, I might change this to... I'm actually going to change that to that kind of mid-tone gray we've got, because I really want to keep this palette limited to 4 colors. So as you can see, we've got 4. I think that's great. That's what we want. So I'm going to just rename our little board here to design BW for black and white, and then I'm going to Control D on that, and it will create a copy for us. Oh, you can see our arrow didn't copy over, so that makes me know that this is not actually in the board itself. So you can see it's outside of these 2 boards in our layers panel. So I'm going to just drag that into our design black and white, and I can control and then paste this into our color board as well. But the hard way to go about coloring this would be to click on all of the layers and then manually change the color. I don't want to do that. What I actually want to just do is change the colors by clicking the board and changing them here. So I'm actually going to first find a palette that I like, and then we will change our hex codes that way. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to go to coolers.co. This is a fantastic color generator. And once I'm here, I like to go in and explore the trending palettes, and this just gives me a ton of palettes to look at really quickly. And the other thing we can do here is we can go up to the search section, and I can choose how many colors I want to be looking for if I'd like. So I know we have 4 colors, so I'm going to just choose 4 colors there. And now we can view trending palettes that are just 4 colors. So this is a great way that I often go in and find palettes that I want to be working with for a specific piece. And then I know that the colors are going to be cohesive and balanced and also just really visually fun. So here's one. I can open the palette in a new tab. I'm going to grab a couple and then we'll decide on one to try out or a few to try out. Okay, so say we've got 4 palettes here that we want to be trying out. Let's say we want to start with this actual red one because I think that really pops. What we're going to do is we are going to click to copy on this individual hex code, and let's go back into Figma. And I'm going to go click on the design board, and I'm going to find our, let's find our first shade, and we can just click in the hex code there and paste, and it will change that hex color right there. So that is really handy for us. We don't have to go in manually, and let's just do the same step for the other colors. So that is one way of generating your image as the color palette that you'd like. And I think this is interesting, but I actually don't really love the colors there, so I'm going to try the other palettes. Okay, so that's just a quick way to really generate our different colors, and these will actually drive the materials. The other thing we need to do before we actually move on to Cinema 4D is we need to make a new version of this design, this black and white design. So I'm going to Control Paste and drag this underneath and just over here. And I'm going to zoom in and we're going to name this Outlines. And we need an outline version because that's actually what's going to create the kind of stitching look or the lines in our cloth simulation. We could try working with this and this would do something, but it will be best if we do outlines. So we are going to test this first by clicking our board, and then if you hit enter, it's going to select all of the shapes in your board, which is really handy. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here to the stroke section on the right, and I'm going to hit plus to add a stroke. And I'm going to just start dragging to increase the width of this stroke here. And right now it's mixed. I'm going to try setting this to, I think, center maybe. And or even outside, but center I think is ideal for us. And I can see that this shape here, this mask, did not get the stroke in the correct place. So what I might have to do is create a new rectangle that is transparent to add a line outside of that. But let's just look to make sure all of our other shapes are correct. So let's just do that rectangle fix quickly. Okay. All right, and so the other thing we need to do is we need to change the colors because, as you guys might know, height maps and vertex maps in Cinema 4D will translate black and white values to certain intensities. So either it will work as a mask or it will work as like a vertex map depending on the color values you have in here. So I need to change all of these to be, I need this whole board to just be two colors, black or white. So I'm going to keep our stroke value at black, and then I'm going to change all the other colors to white. So let me do that right now. Something like this, or you could do the reverse where everything is filled with black and the lines are white. So this is what we want. This is the shape we want to see. So we want colored versions of our design, which we first made a black and white version and then changed the colors of together here in Figma, and then we want an outline version. And this is what you need to drive your simulation, and this is what you need to drive the material. So both are really important in this particular project. The thing I'm going to do now is I can select all of the boards that I want to export. I'm going to export as 6 layers. It's going to take a second to load, and then it will ask me where, so I'll just save those to my downloads. And we don't need to save anything because Figma auto saves, which is nice, but we might want to rename our board, our main document up here to geometric design, and we're good to go. So we can now close Figma and open Cinema 4D. I'm going to create a backdrop, and I'm first going to create a cube, and we're going to scale that down. We don't need it so large, and I'm going to drag this so it's kind of floating in midair. And then I'm going to just zoom in to the cube and maybe rotate around a little bit here. And I'm going to hit N and B on my keyboard to see my wireframe. And I'm going to start increasing my segments here on my cube. We need a lot because this is going to be a cloth simulation, so we need a ton of segments. I might even take this up to 100 by 100, add another 100 here. So this is what that looks like when you zoom in. It's probably not even high enough really for some really fine wrinkles, but we'll call that good for the moment. And before I move on to anything else, I'm going to hit Control and D on my keyboard to bring up this section for project settings. And I'm going to go to Simulation, Scene, and I'm going to turn off my gravity. So I'm just going to type 0 here. So that way the cube won't fall, nothing will happen when we start adding our cloth tags and stuff to this. But before we do that, let's go to our cube. We're going to right click. We're going to go to other tags, and we're going to add a vertex map. And we're going to be driving our cloth or balloon simulation by this vertex map, and this will control where it will balloon out and where it will stay kind of stuck to the cube or the stitching of our design that we made. And the way we can access that is by adding a shader field. And then in this little drop down arrow that we have here, we can click load image. So I'm going to load up our imagery. And we're just going to choose our design outlines here. And you can just hit no here or yes, whatever you're feeling. And as you can see, we get this image projected onto our cube. And because we did a cube and because it's exactly square, these should line up perfectly with the edges of the cube. It should be an exact match there. I think it looks choppy just because our cube mesh is not high enough density. So you could play around with adding more polygons, but I don't want this to be too intense. So on my performance and my system. But something I found that has helped is by going into the clamp section, adding curve, and then kind of playing with these points a little bit. I've also found that clicking on the shader field and then changing this to like alias 3 can be helpful. So you can see we've got a few more details in there now. That's okay with us for now. That's going to drive our cloth simulation. So let's go and click on our cube. Let's right click. We're going to go to simulation tags, and we're actually going to go to balloon. And we get all these settings kind of populated in there by default. So first we can go to mix animation, because this is vital for this part. And we have these options for with pins or with force. And basically you can use this section to make sure certain parts of your geometry is pinned in place or stays the same shape, while the rest of it reacts to whatever dynamics you give it. And this is controlled by a map. So we have a vertex map for that reason. So we can just drag this vertex map in there. And now whatever we do that needs to react with like cloth or balloon, it will be affected by whatever is in here as either 100% intensity or 0 with the red and the yellow values. So we're going to see that in just a moment here. Let's tweak a few things though before we do that. So let's change this balloon value to 2, and let's also drag our vertex map in there. And then let's go to surface, and we're going to change the bendiness to 10. Let's change the thickness to 1 and friction to 0. And then target length, we can hit this little arrow, it opens a drop down, and we have options to do that for any of these values, where we can also plug in a map there. So I'm just going to plug our vertex map in here too, and set this percentage to 110. So it should give some more almost polygons in certain areas of that vertex map as it expands. Okay, so I think we're actually ready now to kind of see what this looks like. So I'm going to back up a little bit here, and let's hit play. And it might take a second to calculate. Cool. So honestly, I think this looks really interesting. We can hit pause on here. This would be a great way to create some really like blobby, gooey stuff too. So you could even add some nice subsurface materials onto here and play around with that. It reminds me almost of the splash screen for cinema not too long ago. This is definitely too intense for our specific shape. Let's go to our balloon section and change this back to like 1.1 maybe, or 1.2. Let's try that. All right, so I think that might be even perfect. Might be just what we're going for. Another thing you can do is you can play around with how much the vertex map influences that actual pin. So by default, we have it set to 100%. If I set it to, say, 50% or around there, it will be pinned a little bit less, so more of the shape will move a little bit more flexibly. Let's say we like that. What we can do is we can click on our cube, right click, go to current state to object, and then let's just delete the balloon tag from that. Don't even need really the original anymore. So let's say that we're happy with that. We like this shape, we are happy with how it looks, and we want to move on now to the material portion. So we can just go and create a new material, drag that onto our cube. And again, because the image we created in Figma is a square, we won't have to worry about resizing this pattern at all. So we can just drag one of our color options into there. So let's try the orange, purple, and kind of green look that we went for. And we can just drag that in there. And as you can see, it should line it up exactly in the right spot. So the only other thing I'll do for our material is add a bump map. And we need something to actually drive our bump map. So I'll show you guys the one that I used in my render. I love using the tiles node to kind of create fabric textures. So I'm just gonna solo this. And let me also pull open my Redshift render view so I can see what I'm working on. So in our tiles node, I'm gonna set all the colors to be white, and the first one will keep black. And then I'm going to change this instead of squares. I think I did paraquet or however you say this. So it looks like that by default. And then I changed the global scale to maybe, let's try 0.1, because as you can see, it creates this kind of shape. We might need to make it smaller, but let's say that's good. We can unsolo this, and now you can see we have bump affecting our surface. So it's a little intense, so I'm going to change this to 0.5 for the actual height scale. And then I'm going to add some roughness to our cube. Maybe something like that is okay. Let's add some lighting to our scene. So I'm going to drag our render view over here. Let's bring our backdrop back in. Let's add some lighting. So I'm going to go to the HDR folder, HDRIs in the asset browser. I'm going to grab my trusty 2-light setup, one that I always use. I pretty much always use it anyway. And we're going to go to the coordinates and just rotate this to a spot that we like. So maybe, so that could be cool. And then let's grab a camera. I'm going to change the focal length to around 120 and then zoom out here so we fit this correctly. And then I'm going to also change my render settings maybe so that this is a taller render than a 16:9. So I have a preset that I've made already that I'll just load in here. And then we can zoom in further. Yeah, so let's say that that is the shape we want to go for. We could call that good. The bump map shapes for the tile node might still be a little bit too big, as you can see. So I'm going to go back in and change that back to 0.05. And if we really want to just add one more thing, maybe we could add an area light, drag it to the right, and then angle this towards our cube here. So something there, and then I'm going to take the spread down. Cool, so I think that's fun. Might just add some focus with our bokeh and change the aperture to like 1.8. And then use this little icon here to pick my selection point. So yeah, that's really how I made this effect. You could add another camera and really zoom in here to some of the details. Let's see, let's refresh this. Let's pick a new focus point. And let's see, how do we feel about that? Cool. That's nice. The only other thing I will talk about briefly is how I made it tiled on my cube in one of my renders. So for that, I actually just went to photopea.com, and this is like a Photoshop dupe online. And I just grabbed my outline and I just resized this so there was 4 of them, and it should kind of snap to the center. So find that point and then snap it, and then just duplicate this 4 times, and then do the same for laying out your materials you want to use. But then that's just what I plugged into the vertex map instead of just a single one of these outlines. So there's definitely creative freedom there with exploring. Make it your own, you know, grab whatever color palette you'd prefer. And then, oh yeah, one last thing, because I'm seeing the jaggedness here on our vertex map. We didn't cover that. The way I usually just fix certain things like that is either by throwing it into a subdivision, or I go into the render tags, redshift object, geometry, and let's override that and enable tessellation. This will smooth out those harsh, jagged polygons for us in the render, which is nice because then it's not totally sucking up our performance in the actual scene. I think it looks great. I love it. I'm having fun with it. Hope you guys enjoyed learning how to make this for yourself. So I'm going to render this one, and I will see you guys in the next tutorial. Thanks so much for watching, guys. See ya.